Taking 900 years. Okay, looks like we're ready to go. Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. I almost said happy Wednesday. So if that's any indication of how Monday has been, I think that's probably pretty accurate. I have the special privilege of having Melissa here, sharing a little bit about her journey of overcoming some of her painful, frustrating hormone symptoms. And she has graciously agreed to share a little bit of that process with you and give you a sneak peek into what it really looks like and what it looks like to get rid of all of those symptoms and in a very short period of time. So welcome, Melissa. Do you mind sharing a little bit about you and maybe where you're joining from if you're comfortable, and then we can just dive right in.
Yeah, I'm joining from Ohio, so
Awesome.
I'm in the Midwest. I live on a farm. I am a farmer's wife,
Okay.
um, and I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. But I
Amazing.
also work as a dog trainer. So I work and I am home a lot with the girls while my husband does farming stuff. And so, yeah.
Amazing. You're just a little bit busy, like not a lot, but just a little bit. Yeah. So how long have you been doing dog training? Is it a family business?
I have been doing it since I graduated college, which was a long time ago. I actually majored in zoology and psychology
Oh,
and
cool.
got a job for guide dogs, working with guide dogs. So my background is actually service dog training. So that's the majority of what
Oh,
I do. But
that's
then I
amazing.
also do pet dog training as well on top of that. But I work with an organization to do that.
That's amazing. I'm like, I wish you lived close because I could definitely use you right now.
We have virtual stuff now because of
Right.
COVID. We've made
Right.
everything virtual.
That's amazing. Okay. I'm going to have to connect with you about that because she's a very good puppy, but she's still a puppy and there's
Yeah.
definitely still some things that we need to work on. So anyways, I am super excited to chat with you. So why don't we start with kind of where you were before we met. So where, what you were experiencing with your hormones, what that was like for you as a working mom. And then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I would say it started after my second was born. So she's going to be 2 coming up. And I had the early symptoms of what was postpartum depression and
Right.
anxiety, but I didn't know what that was. I don't have depression or anxiety that runs in my family. I've
Okay.
never experienced with it. So
Right.
um, up until that point, I'd pretty much just dismissed what I was feeling. Oh, I'm just tired. I'm tired because I have a 1-year-old or a baby and a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
That's why I'm tired. And I'm moody because I'm not sleeping as well. And
Right.
so I kept making excuses and I finally got to a point. So I went to my doctor, it's like everyone does, and they agreed it was postpartum stuff. And everyone knows that's hormonal, but that's all they tell you. Like, oh,
Right.
yeah, just the chemicals in your brain, your hormones are going crazy. And pretty much I was told like medication is my option. Like, I
Right.
can talk to a counselor, but like medication is the solution. And initially, I was left with the impression that if I'm on medication, maybe after a year, I can wean off of it. So it's like a fix.
Mhm. Right.
Well, I was a year into it. I was getting close to that year mark where I would have been on medication for a year. And I was still having some pretty bad symptoms. So before the medication, I was like, I was having anxiety attacks that lasted for like hours.
Right.
But even after that year, I was grumpy and irritable, not just around my cycle, like all the time. I
Right.
was tired all the time. And I was desperate, honestly. I was to the point where I was desperate. I knew I couldn't stay where I was. But what I saw with my medication is we're getting to that year mark where I was hopeful that I would start to wean off of it. And I'm now having to ask my doctor to up my dose. And I'm almost
Right.
at the max dose that I can take.
Right.
And in my head, I'm like, this is not an option. Like me being on medication for the rest of my life is not an option. Like for this,
Right.
I was supposed to get better, and I'm not. And I think I was on Facebook and happened upon your class, or, you
Yeah.
saying about your class. And typically I'm like, I'm not going to do those Facebook things,
Right.
but I was just at a place of like despair. I mean, I didn't know what else to do. I was on the medication. I was
Right.
looking into seeing a counselor, but I was miserable. My marriage was suffering. My kids were suffering. Because at that time I was home with them a lot more than I am now. And
Right.
I was constantly just snapping at them. And so I saw your thing and I'm like, why not? Why not listen and see what she has to say?
Right.
What else have I got to do?
Right.
So one night after my kids went to bed, I was on and I happened to be there well, it was funny. I had scheduled it, but I couldn't be on the live chat
Okay.
originally, but then you had internet connections and
Okay.
had to reschedule it. And so
Yep.
that allowed me to make it to the live.
Oh, good.
So I
Yay.
was then
Divine
able to
intervention.
do the live. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was able to do the live and ask my questions. And I think the live helps because I can see that you're like a real person, not
Totally.
just someone who videotaped herself. And, like it's not like a cookie cutter, like here's a program. Um, so yeah, that's where I was at. I was literally desperate. I had done everything else.
Oh,
And honestly, I was really skeptical when I started, but I'm like, this is my last shot. Like, this is
right.
my last shot, or I'm taking medication, high doses of medication for the rest of my life. And kept thinking, this isn't fair. This
Yep.
isn't fair. I wasn't like this. I'm
Right.
not who I used to be. I'm
Right.
not, who I am. And I don't
Right.
even know who I am anymore. And I
Right.
kind of lost myself. Like I didn't even know what it was like. I think I remember telling you just within a couple weeks of the program, I'm like, I didn't even know what it was like to be normal. I forgot that I could be normal or what normal felt like. And
Right.
I mean, I felt differences within the first week.
Right.
And I was like, okay, okay, and I kept
Yeah.
going and
Well, and I think that skepticism, I think it's really important to talk about that because I get a lot of women on calls who are like, I'm really sorry, but I don't like I am skeptical. And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about that because I was in that exact same position. And I know that you were. And it's what helps me to kind of it's well, one, it's why I built this program because there is a huge gap. There still is. I was actually talking to one of my friends who is a nurse and health coach, and her kind of niche is postpartum. And she's like, there's still a huge gap. I mean, like, I talk to, I don't know, 50 people a month on one on one calls, and they're still having the same issues that I was having 10 years ago with their physicians, not being able to have those conversations or just like, well, this is just how it is. You're just never going to go back to normal. And nobody explains why that's happening or that you don't have to feel that way. And so, I definitely remember. Okay, honey, I need you to wait downstairs.
No, we're done.
I-
We have to game.
Okay, you need to wait downstairs. I'm on a video. Thank you. Gosh, this is what it's like having kids. Okay, so anyways, um, that just totally derailed my train of thought. But yes, so
it's a
that
huge
was
gap.
it's a
Huge gap,
yeah,
especially with postpartum, I think,
right.
because you're given your 6-week quizzes,
Yep.
and then you're good to go. Like,
Right.
oh, and at that point, you're just fatigued anyways. And
Right.
so I didn't even realize I had a problem till like 6 months postpartum.
Right. Yeah. I
And
didn't
I look
either.
back now, yeah, and I look back now and see like early warning signs, but I didn't know any different at the time.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, it was just one of those, there's just a huge gap. It's like, okay, I have this, now what? And it's
Right.
not a happy outcome. I remember
Right.
distinctively I was told at my first appointment, we can put you on medication. And I said, okay.
Mhm.
And they said, for some people they can wean off of it, but we like you to be stable for a year on it. She said,
Yeah.
but some people have to be on it all their life. And I'm like, what? Like, what? I
Mhm.
didn't realize this is what I signed up for, and I
Yeah.
didn't realize I'm still paying the price of having kids.
Yep.
It was one of those where I was just in this
Totally.
negative,
Yep.
defeated, just feeling so defeated. Like, this is my
Right.
life now, and I'm going to have to figure out how to function the best way I can in this new life that
Right.
I didn't ask for and that I'm not happy with.
Right. Exactly. And I think this is where, and I was just talking to a friend about that. This is where we fail people. And like as medical practitioners, we should be innovating, we should be creating, we should be bringing our scientific background and saying how do we fill this space, and create a solution. And so tell me a little bit. I mean, we've talked about family, we've talked about marriage, we've talked about really kind of where you were, before we started working together, and what changed for you. Like what you said, you started noticing difference within the first 1 to 2 weeks. So what I'm getting all the notifications like now. I didn't get any all day, and now here I am. So what kind of shifted for you?
Um, for me, so the first part was, I didn't have high expectations. I was just like, I'm gonna do it. And, my main goal was if I can even function on my current dose of medication, like that
Right,
would be progress. Um, I had high hopes. I would say I
right.
had high hopes and I knew it was gonna take work.
Sure,
Um, So, I would say definitely it was a huge mindset change. That was the first change. I
totally.
went in feeling very out of control of my emotions, and I went in feeling very confused as to why me? Why is this happening to me? And um, within that first week, hydration was huge, for me,
Yes,
obviously. Because I'm in a constant state of
totally.
dehydration. But I
Mhm,
started to notice like, oh, I've got more energy
mhm.
and okay, like it wasn't overnight. It was
Right,
I have more energy today than I usually do. I only had to
right.
take an hour nap, not a 2-hour nap.
Exactly. Little
And then it
incremental
was
changes.
yeah, and then it was, oh hey, like I'm actually having some good days now because before it was just I never had good days. It was a bad day or not as bad day. Those
Right,
are what I categorized my days
right.
as.
Right,
And I remember waking up every morning and being like, "Ugh, what are my hormones gonna do to me today? Like, what are
right.
they gonna do to me?" So the first change I noticed was I was having some good days finally, like
Awesome,
finally some like normal mood days. I'm like,
awesome.
oh, like it was almost like I could take a deep breath. Like I
Mhm.
remember
Relax a
how I
little.
felt.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember who I was. Like I had totally forgotten
right.
what normal was like.
Totally.
Um, and then I think after that, it was, that just kept compounding. Then I had more, equal good days and bad days
Yep,
until I finally got to a point where I have more good days than bad days. And I don't have a whole lot of bad days, like completely bad days.
right.
Um, but I think the biggest thing for me was to realize I had control over
Yes.
how I
Yes.
was feeling based off of my lifestyle changes. And like over Christmas did not go well. I just threw everything that I knew out the window because I was busy and I was just okay, well, we're just not going to worry about it right now. And I paid the price for it. Like
Yep.
I had
Yeah.
2 days of a really awful mood. Like the
Mhm.
depression, the anxiety was back almost to an attack
Oh,
again. But I knew. The thing is,
yeah.
the difference between now and before was I knew. I knew
Yep.
it was because of my choices I had made, and
Right.
I knew how to fix it. And
Good.
sure enough, within 2 or 3 days of fixing everything, I was better,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm not stuck in this helpless cycle of what are my hormones gonna do to me today?
Yes.
Are they gonna dictate my day? Are they gonna ruin my day? I
Right.
now know, well, it's the choices I make on whether how I'm
Right.
gonna be feeling, tomorrow or the today. And
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the big keys is realizing like, oh, if my hormones go crazy, I'm no longer in that like hopeless place of being told I just have to keep taking medication, or I just need to keep doing more lab testing and like cross our fingers that our doctor's going to know how to read it and know what to do. Or like, oh, I know that's because, I wasn't paying attention to the food that I was eating. I wasn't making sure that I was taking care of myself. And these are the things that those invisible factors that we talk about that will make or break your hormone journey. And a
Mhm.
lot of times, like as moms, we're waiting for something in our life to get easier so that we can, like,
Mhm.
so that I can focus on myself. And really, what we focus on, um, if you're working one on one with me or in the Happy Hormones program, is what can you do today? I don't care if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 hours. Like, what can you do today that is actively going to reduce your stress or address the sleep issue? Because those are the harder things. Like, those
Mhm.
are the harder things to talk about, because maybe the real issue isn't that you're not getting sleep, it's that your husband won't help you.
Mhm.
And that's like a bigger, I mean, that's like a big old can of worms, right? So
Right.
that's a harder thing to address than it is to just say, just take a pill and just, put
Mhm.
some creams on and hope that it works. Like, it's it's learning how you, Melissa, how your life and your circumstances impact your hormones. And so for you to be able to even have a couple bad days and know, like, this is, I totally know how to fix this, is
Mhm.
amazing. Is
Yeah, I
amazing.
mean, I know it's temporary, which helps, and I think a big mindset change for me was I go into everything as a perfectionist. I have to do
Mm,
it perfectly or I
sure.
don't want to do it at all.
Yeah.
And so I realized that the little things I could do matter. So I have all of these lifestyle changes and I'm still tracking them, by the way,
Mm,
because it helps keep me accountable. But I do these, but if I miss one day, I don't, in the past, I was like, well, then I'm just going to throw everything out the window for today because
sure.
I missed this portion of it. But I
Totally.
realized that still had a part to play.
Right.
And so I
So good.
realized I can, my new mantra was kind of like, do what I can do in the day.
Yep.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take each day and do what I can do to the best of my ability and not beat myself up for
Right.
whatever I couldn't do and start a new day tomorrow. And then I
Exactly.
also, took your program, but I used it as a guideline, not as like a Bible.
Right.
I took it and said, okay, these things don't work in my life, or I'm not being consistent because they're harder to implement because I don't like the taste of this, or I don't like the texture of this.
Right.
And I thought of creative ways to change it so that it
Right.
fits in my life. Using the principles I learned, I can take
Exactly.
that and be creative with it on how it can fit into my life.
Exactly. And that's where, this is where it's like, yes, we have these foundational pillars that every woman needs, but you individually, how that's going to impact you is going to be different than somebody who's maybe struggled with an eating disorder in the past, or maybe they have a kiddo with special needs. Like, their life picture looks very different. And so that's where the personalization piece and you getting to, like you said, take those basic principles of what to do or what to focus on and say, okay, how can I do this in a way that is actually going to get the same impact, but not, you know, not like, give up the carbs and chocolate. Like, you still get to do all those things. So that's a really, really good point that you made. And so tell me a little bit. I remember something that you shared with me a couple weeks ago about something your husband said. Um, or maybe it was what you said. You said, like, I'm the calmest one in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And so do you wanna share a little bit about what that's like, and kind of maybe some of the dynamic that's changed for you?
Yeah, well, I always used to be like the rock, kind of like the even-keeled person who
Right.
everyone knows me as my emotions are not a factor. I am just like I keep my emotions out of things. I'm pretty even-keeled about
Yeah,
things. Well, with my hormones going crazy, I was not that person. I
sure,
was yelling and blowing off the handle, and so
sure.
my husband had to be the calm one. And he's typically like the worrier in our
Yeah,
relationship and the one that maybe has more of the anxiety and the stress than what I do.
got it.
Well, now that things have shifted back and I'm now more of the calm one most of the time. I still have my days, but most of the time I'm the calm one. He's starting to realize he's like, huh, I think I'm really stressed. Like, I think I have a lot of anxiety. Like, he's starting to see in himself now some
Oh,
of the things because
yeah,
now I am back functioning as that like stable,
totally.
solid one.
Right. Right, and I mean, I get maybe probably like 50 to 60% of the women in the program that will message me about 3 to 4 weeks in and say, "Hey, can I have my husband do these things too?" because you do, like, once you start to peel back those layers, it's kind of like the fog lifts and you realize, "Oh, I didn't realize how little I was functioning on." Like, just trying to
Mhm.
get through the day, realizing that, yeah, some of those principles can be applied to our spouses and our children too, because they're foundational just for everyone's hormone health. So what would you say, to a Melissa, you, somebody just like you, who's, same position, looking for the answer? What would you say to her, like sitting in the audience watching you?
Um, I would tell her not to give up.
Okay.
I would tell her to keep going, keep striving, and that this was the answer I was waiting for. Like this is the piece that was missing for me.
Yeah.
And it's not just the changes, but what I've learned,
Right.
the piece
Mindset
of
stuff.
how everything is
Yeah.
connected. Yeah. And that there is light at the end and
Right.
that life can be better. And it doesn't, like, I hear you always said that from the beginning, like, it doesn't have to be that way. And when you're in it, you look out and be like, well, that's easy for you to say. Like, you've been
Totally.
fine
Yep.
for 8 years, you know?
Yep.
But I'm saying from not being fine only 3 months ago, like,
Yeah.
there is a bright light at the end,
Right.
and it's still going to take time for me to be consistent on a lot of stuff and for me to be baseline,
Yeah.
but I'm going the direction I've wanted to go.
Right.
I'm going towards that direction of being able to wean off my medication. And
Amazing.
um, I know we've talked about I had underlying health issues that I didn't even expect to be touched during this. I wasn't even worried about them, and they're
Right.
completely resolved,
Right.
and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's an added bonus.
Right? It's true, and we do see that. I mean, we do see that a lot. It's obviously not something I'm gonna, promise like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna happen." But when you deal with those core issues. So for women, I'm just gonna take like 2 seconds on this. For women, our hormones are like our vital signs, right? They're an indicator of our overall health. And so if they're, it's not uncommon, I would say like at least 90% of the women that I talk to have other complex, either chronic or acute medical issues. And it's like the hormones, all of the mood swings and the irritability and the painful periods and the irregular cycles and infertility is a manifestation of what's going on way down below. So when we deal with those root issues, yeah, it's going to heal like all of the branches of the tree because the root system is now healthy. So that makes a lot of sense to me that that you did see that, even though we weren't expecting necessarily for that to change so quickly. So what was I know, I think you've shared a little bit about this, but what was would you say your biggest takeaway was, having all of the principles in place and knowing how to do them, and like knowing how to look at the big picture if you have a wonky month and be like, oh, I know how to fix that? Or what would you say was like your biggest takeaway?
um I mean, I think definitely getting the wisdom piece of it, at least for me, because that's how I operate, is when I understand something, then I can implement it.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing in terms of continued success and success for me has been that like I'm able to um do it in a way that I don't feel I'm depriving myself of tons of stuff. Like, yes, I
Totally.
have made some dietary changes, but I'm super picky. And I remember that was one of the first things I said to you is I'm hesitant about this program because I'm really picky. And I mean, because I've done some research online and it's all, I mean, completely like you go vegan. And I'm like, I like my meat. We raise or beef cows. Like we
Yeah.
eat beef all the time. And
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
but I was able to make some changes and but still not feel like I'm completely miserable because you don't
Right.
want to change things to make your mood better in one area, but then just feel miserable because you don't feel like you have any quality of life now because you're
Yeah.
spending it all worrying
trying to
about
eat
your
right,
hormones.
or yeah, trying to eat right or be perfect about your sleep. Like it's
Yeah.
not, it's very much, I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is very much about you still have a life to live. You know, you still have
Mhm,
a job to go to, you still have your family. And there's going to be times where those things, you know, your sleep gets disrupted, your stress is
mhm,
challenged. And so, what are you going to do with that? You know, like it has to fit within the construct of your life. And so, I think that's one of my core values, I know, was like, how do we simplify like all of this information that's out there and give people really big wins without having to completely flip their life upside down? Because you're right, you read the, you know, you read blog posts, you read all the information that's out there, and it becomes overwhelming. Yes, you can have this, no you can't have this, it just is
yeah,
very confusing. So I'm glad that you felt, you know, you felt that way, like it's doable for me, I can do this. And
mhm.
those little incremental changes make a big whopping difference to your hormones because they're that sensitive.
And it's not a huge time commitment in terms of it's just making changes into how you already do things.
Right.
So
Yeah.
with a 1 and 3-year-old, I don't have any spare time to just go and like completely do this huge, like add more time to my day. I
Yeah.
can't do that. But this
Right.
doesn't add more time to your day. You just rethink how you do things throughout your day.
Right. Yeah. That's perfect. That's a perfect way of describing it because that was definitely my goal when I created this was like I'm a busy working mom, but how would this work for somebody with like 8 kids? You know
Mhm,
what I mean? Like how it has to be doable for like the busiest person on the planet because
mhm.
otherwise it's not sustainable and it has to be. And so which is
Especially
part.
when you're starting out, you're in a place where you have low motivation, you
Mhm.
feel defeated, you start out feeling defeated anyways. Like that's
Right.
how I started, at least, as I
Right.
started my journey already feeling defeated and already feeling tired and run down. And so yeah, you need those small wins. And if it was too hard, I would have quit like first week, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Same, yeah. Which, yeah, I mean, thankfully, I know I tell people this. I'm like, my doctor was like, here's a list of 20 things you have to change overnight. And I was like, when you're having panic attacks and anxiety and fatigue and insomnia, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Do that? You know what I mean? So I'm like, yeah, that would have worked for a healthy male,
Yeah.
probably. Like,
Right.
not a sleep deprived postpartum depression woman, but here I am.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think just giving people those small wins and knowing that you can do it.
Mhm.
Because really it's about more than just getting rid of these symptoms, right? It's about getting your life back and allowing you to feel your best and know that your body is now on a trajectory of healing, not that like downward, okay, things are still going down, not up. So, do you have any final like parting words of wisdom that you or juicy nuggets that you want to share to the women who are listening? I'm sorry I can't see comments right now for some reason, but go ahead. You're good.
I think, well, it's a funny dynamic, I would say, between like, at least for me and my husband, you know,
Mhm.
he'll say something, and he's been very supportive throughout it, but trying to get him on board was an interesting conversation.
Sure.
Um, and I just remember I kind of had to turn it around like, well, hey, this might help my drive, you know,
Yeah.
this might, he's like, oh, well, maybe I'm on board for that
Yeah.
then. Um,
Yeah.
so
It's true. Yep, it's true.
yeah, but
Gotta
it's
speak your
funny
language.
now when I tell him, he almost forgets how I was.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like when I'll be sharing the program or sharing my successes with like people in my family, I'll say, "Oh yeah, my mood is so much more improved." And they'll look at John and go, "John?" And he goes, "Yeah." Like kind of like I know I'm not supposed to say this, but
Right.
like,
Can I not
yes,
can I agree? Can I
yeah.
agree to this? Yeah. That's
Yeah, so
awesome.
it's been good, like, just all around relationships wise, and even my sister, I have a twin sister, and she was like, I was only maybe 3 weeks into the program, and we had met, it was for Thanksgiving. She's
Yeah.
like, "Melissa, you have so much more energy, like, I've noticed that." And I'm like, "Well, thank you."
I am working on it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Pat on the back. You know,
right.
hard work. Yeah. No, and I think that's a really important thing because I think as women we know like we feel this responsibility for our families, and we know like that maybe we're not carrying the weight like we want to because we don't feel good, you know?
Mhm.
So there's that guilt shame kind of complex that's mixed in with already how terrible you're feeling.
Yeah.
And um so the hopeless feeling is coming from all of, part in part because you can't get better, you don't know how,
Mhm.
and not being able to fix your part of the family dynamic that not that you're responsible for everybody
Yeah.
else's behavior, but it certainly makes things lighter and easier, especially like raising kids is not easy.
Right.
Being married isn't easy sometimes. And so to have all of that other stuff piled on top just makes it 10 times worse. And so the other thing too is families heal when our hormones heal. It's not just us
Mhm.
that gets better, it's our families that get better. And so I love to hear and see that too, like that your husband is benefiting, your children are benefiting, everybody wins in that
Yeah. My
situation.
my
So,
3-year-old, I was getting her changed for bed the other day, and she goes, "Mom, can I tell you something?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "You're a nice mommy." And it
oh,
about made me cry because I have not been a nice mommy, like, I have not been, but I've changed so much that even my kids, like, are
wow.
happier and not as
Sweet.
stressed out, and I know I was, like,
Right.
fighting back tears when she's like,
Yeah.
"You're a nice." I'm like, "I am? I'm a nice mommy? Okay, I'm on the right track." Um, so,
That's
it's
amazing.
just it's been good, and I still have a little ways to go, but I know I'm gonna get there, which is
Yep.
comforting. And before I started the program, I told my husband I was the sickest I've ever been in my
Yep.
life. I mean, just mentally, physically, everything was spiraling out of control.
Yep.
And now I'm on my way to being the healthiest I've ever been, like not just feeling
Wow.
wise, but my lab reports are showing me that. And so I've been trying to tell everyone, like, hey, it's probably your hormones. Like when I read
Yeah.
something on, but I don't think anyone wants to hear from me right now.
Right.
so,
Right.
so I don't go any further. But like I want to
Right.
tell
You're
people, like,
planting the
hey,
seeds. Yeah, you're planting
yeah,
the seeds, which is
yeah,
amazing. And I love that you shared that and that, your kids are recognizing. I mean, I know that we've had some other moms who's like, especially, older they are, the more able they are to communicate. But one kid was like, I feel like I have my mom back. And because they do, even though they wouldn't necessarily hold it against us,
right,
they know, and so that just makes me so happy to hear that, and I know it made you happy to hear that, like, okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'm doing it, like, I'm doing a good thing. So
And that's what
if
I think
yeah,
people need to let go of the guilt they hold on to, because that
totally.
was a big piece for me, is feeling guilty of doing this for myself. Not only the time it would take away, I felt it would take away from my kids, but the investment, the financial investment. And now I look back and say, how could I not afford it? Like how
Right,
now that I'm seeing the benefits, how could I not afford doing that? Like it's not even a point at this point of how much we invested. It's wow, like look how much we're saving, and not even just saving with family time, saving from doctor's appointments.
right,
I got a cold the other day, and normally my colds blow up because I'm asthmatic and they blow up into some pretty nasty stuff. And I got a cold,
right,
and it was just a cold for
amazing.
2 days, and then it left.
Woo, that's
I was like, all
amazing.
right, I didn't have to go on medication. I didn't have to go on steroids. Like I was good. I'm like, oh,
That
it's
is
just a
huge.
cold. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, because, yep, we do help, we do work on the lymphatic system in there too, because it's all part
Hmm.
of part of healing your hormones. So, first of all, thank you so much for sharing. That
Hmm.
was beautiful. And I love getting to hear. I mean, I'm always in like the deep end with you guys, getting to see the inner
Yeah.
workings, but to get to see a little bit more of the big picture of where things are now is huge to me. And I know there are women watching just like you who are inspired by your story. And if that's you and you are not sure what to do, you're just like where Melissa was, where you've tried all the things and you're still feeling really not awesome, and you're tired of missing out on life and just not feeling your best, then drop a comment below, drop an emoji, and I will make sure to reach out to you because this is my life's passion. So getting to help you, even if it's just finding some resources. That's what I love to do. So thank you so much, Melissa, for being on
Mhm.
here today. It was
Yeah.
a privilege to get to hear from you. And thank you, everybody, for watching. I was not able to see comments, but I will go back and scroll through comments a little bit later and make sure that I didn't miss anyone. If you've got questions while you're watching, make sure to drop them below as well. And you have a great rest of your day, Melissa.
Right. Bye.
Bye.